Hi everyone, welcome back. We are officially in fall season and it's one of my favorite times of year. It's so beautiful outside, but that does not mean that everything in the garden just stops. So right now we're really busy on turning everything over, taking some of our summer crops out that have finished their course of production, and we're converting over to start our fall and winter plantings so that we have some crops ready and available for us in the spring months. One of the crops that's nearing its end of life but seems to be holding on a lot longer this year than in years past is our basil crop. We grow lots of basil because we enjoy having it fresh in salads and in various different recipes that we cook with throughout the summertime. But I also like to take, anytime we have extra basil, I like to take it and preserve it and freeze it in the form of pesto so that I can use it on sauces for pasta and in other recipes throughout the entire year. Now, interesting fact, I'm Italian by heritage, have grown up with pesto all my life. And when I was pregnant with our youngest daughter, I had a serious food aversion to pesto. And we had a really good basil crop that year. And I could not do a thing with it. So I had to call in grandma, who's my mom, to help with processing the basil because I knew after I had our youngest daughter that I probably wouldn't have that food aversion anymore. But nonetheless, she came to the rescue. She processed all of our basil into pesto and we were able to save it in the freezer to have it for later. I can eat it just fine now, but there was a period there for a short window of time while I was pregnant that I couldn't have it at all. Otherwise, it would make me super sick. Anyway, without further ado, let me go ahead and teach you today how to process basil into pesto for preservation in the freezer so that you can use it any point throughout the year as you wish. Okay, so as you can see here, I have a huge pile of basil. I went out to the garden this morning. I harvested everything that I could. You can see some of the basil actually has already started trying to go to seed with or make the white flowers. These flowers are edible. You can use them in salads. I prefer to let my chickens enjoy them, but nonetheless, I have all this basil and I need to prepare it so that it's ready to put into our food processor. Now, when your plants are young, the leaves and the stalks are quite tender, and you can actually just take it as is once you've pinched it off the plant, and you can go ahead and throw all of that in the food processor together. But as your plants mature, the stems get a little bit thicker, and they tend to get quite a bit more woody in texture, and you really don't want to eat that. So your goal to prepare your basil is to actually go ahead and pinch the leaves off the stem, and I have a salad spinner set up here so that I can easily wash the leaves. I'm not going to wash everything. Why would I waste all that water? So I'm going to wash the leaves once I have everything prepared. And you can just go ahead and pinch everything off, and anything that you have left remaining as far as the stalk of the stem goes, you can put into your compost, or for me, it ends up becoming chicken treats that they can go ahead and chew on. Now, I often get questions about where on the basil plant should I go ahead and pinch. And so this is actually a really good example right here. If you've got your basil stems and it's growing, you'll see that there's some clear division in the stems. And the part that you want to pinch is actually just a 1/4 inch above any section where you've got your two main leaves, and then you've got new leaves sprouting at a 45-degree angle. Anywhere in there, it's good to pinch about a 1/4 inch above. Now, I'm not going to be able to pinch this because this is a more mature plant and the stalk is woodsy. So you may need scissors if you've had your plants hanging on for a while. And so anywhere above there, go ahead and pinch. And what that's going to do is that's going to foster and encourage new growth out of what remains on that plant. You're going to get new stems coming out, and you're going to end up with a bushier, more productive basil plant if you continuously do that with your plant. Now, this plant, I have obviously allowed for it to grow for some time before I've needed to pick it. So where I cut it off at, you can imagine the remainder of the plants down below, again, looking just like this as I've left it behind, with the new growth coming out at the 45-degree angle. So I'm just going to continue pinching all the leaves off from the basil that I have pinched and snipped this morning, and then we'll come back once it's ready for the next step. Okay, so I have pinched all the leaves off of my basil stems. They've been washed and strained so that they're ready to go. Now, when you make your batch of pesto, you certainly don't have to have this much basil to be able to do this process. You can use simply just a couple little handfuls of basil leaves, and that'll give you enough for a batch. You really want to just use what you have or use what you think that you might need. In this case, I harvested as much as I could because I don't know how long the plants are going to hold on for, and I want to make sure that I have a good reserve and a good stock for us for the freezer. But again, you don't have to have this much basil leaf. Now, once your leaves are prepared, you're simply going to grab handfuls of them and nestle them into your food processor. You're going to fill your food processor up quite a little ways with your leaves. And then before you close this up, I want you to take your lemon juice. You can use either lemon juice pre-prepared from the store, or you can use lemon juice from fresh lemons. Doesn't matter. My lemons are currently trying to reproduce themselves, so everything I have is green. So I'm just going to use this lemon juice here, and I'm going to give it a good drizzle of liquid over the top. Now you're going to say, well, how much lemon juice? There's not an exact recipe for this. It's all look and feel. Like your old Italian grandma, it's all look and feel. So you really do have to watch and see on this one. I gave it a good little drizzle. I'm going to close up my food processor here, and then I'm just going to pulse it. And you'll notice the leaves will start to break themselves up. They'll get a little bit of a coating with that lemon juice. And then I am going to use the top section where there's an opening here just to add a little bit more in. I want to make sure that the cuttings of the leaves get some lemon juice on them. This is going to keep them and prevent them from turning dark. Now this is a quicker method for this. Some other chefs prefer to take their basil leaves, actually blanch them real quick in hot water, and then bring them out of that hot water, and that's supposed to prevent them from turning. I don't have that much time, so this works much better, and it gives a bright flavor to your pesto. So once you start to have this mixture starting to break itself up and get into smaller sections, then you're gonna wanna go ahead and add garlic. Now I have whole peeled cloves of garlic here ready to go. You can use chopped garlic from the store. It's not going to taste as good, but whatever you have is fine. And you can choose to put in at this point as much or as little garlic as you like. My kids don't like a whole lot of garlic in their pesto, so I will probably only put about a clove in for this particular batch. But you can certainly choose to put more if you like a lot more garlic. It's something that you can also add later when you're making your pasta and you're adding the pesto onto the pasta as a sauce, or you're adding it into your recipe. You can always add more garlic in later. So don't hesitate to go light because you can adjust it later for whatever recipe you're using it for. So I'm going to drop that in. And then with that, I'm going to add some extra virgin olive oil. You want to have a really good flavored olive oil here. This is an olive oil that you would want to actually dip your bread into and eat. This is not an olive oil that you're necessarily going to use for cooking that might be of lesser quality, because you do want to taste the olive oil flavor. And again, no specific recipe on this. I'm going to give it a good drizzle. And then I'm just going to pulse this and keep adjusting with the olive oil in this recipe until I have a texture and a consistency that looks like it's going to form a loose paste. And that's because at the end of this, we're going to have a puree, so to speak, that we're going to pour into ice cube trays. And that's how we're going to freeze and portion our pesto as sauce in our freezer for us to enjoy later. recommend having a spatula on hand. You may need to open up your food processor, scrape down the sides so that you can make sure everything gets a nice fine chop to it. My kids do not like their pesto leafy, so they like to have it really good and pureed. Now, once you have a batch of your pesto sauce ready to go and you have it to the consistency that you like, you can see it's actually pouring from the bowl here. You can pour it straight into an ice cube tray. Now, these are giant ice cube trays. This is a silicone mold, and I like it because the silicone helps to pop the cube out once it's frozen. But if you don't have a silicone tray, that's okay. You can use a standard ice cube tray that you would have that might come with your refrigerator, or that you can even purchase from the Dollar Tree. And you're just gonna fill up your cubed sections so that they can freeze individually. And then all you need to do is, once they've frozen, you can put them in a Ziploc bag, store them, and then just pull them out as you're wishing to have pesto for your recipe or for your pasta sauce. You can take this mixture and even mix it with a roux as a base and turn it into a creamy pesto. So you're not just stuck to an olive oil based pesto here. There's lots of different varieties that you can do with the recipe here. So you can see that little portion gave me 2 nice big cubes. I'm going to continue working in batches until I've processed through all of the basil. So now that I have processed through all of my basil, it's time to prep these for the freezer. So out of all of the basil that I had, I was able to fill 8 cubes worth, which for our family, that's the equivalent of 8 pasta meals with pesto sauce. So I'm just going to take your standard saran wrap. I'm going to cover each of these trays, and these are going to go into the freezer until frozen solid, which will take approximately a day, maybe 2, depending on how cold your freezer is set. And then after, I can take these out and I can pop them out once they've had a chance to freeze all the way through, and store them in a Ziploc bag for quick and easy access. So into the freezer these go. Now, as you can imagine, I have been snipping and preparing pesto all season long. And so I keep my individual cubes. Once I pop them out, I individually wrap them in just some saran wrap. And then I stick the whole cube into a gallon Ziploc bag. And so I keep it just like this. And whenever I want to make pasta with pesto or another recipe with pesto, all I need to do is reach in, grab a cube. I let it sit on the countertop for a few minutes. That easily allows the saran wrap to release itself, and then I can melt it into whatever recipe I'm preparing. Now, you might ask, well, that was just basil leaves, lemon juice, olive oil, and some garlic. Where's the pine nuts? Well, where's the cheese? Well, for one, I don't really like pine nuts. I know, but I don't really like them. And they're really expensive, and quite frankly, I think they're just a waste. So I don't add them in. You could add that to the recipe and freeze it with the pine nuts in. You could certainly add the pine nuts at a later point in time whenever you're making your pesto and you're preparing it with the recipe that you're preparing it with. You can add that in. I also choose to hold off on the cheese and add the cheese in whenever I'm making the recipe, so that way it's freshly melted and you get the fresh season to taste that you can do right at that point. So this is literally just a pesto base that you can use and then alter later on. Again, very inexpensive to make, easy to prepare ahead of time, and then you can just grab and go. I hope you've enjoyed learning how to make today's recipe for Make Ahead Freezer Pesto. If you liked this recipe, go ahead and hit the like button, share this recipe with your friends, make it at home. Until next time, bye everyone.